The Israelis, again, don't want that death toll to rise. They don't want the Israel side death toll to rise. And if they go into Gaza on a ground invasion, there will be a higher death toll on both sides. When Israel gets struck, it's a strike against the United States. Right. They are our appendage in the Middle East. In terms of morale, I think the Israelis lost this, and they know that. And they will have to go back when this is all over and sit down and think about why there was an intel lapse. I think the goal wasn't to wipe out Israel. I think that is way too audacious for even for them. I think the goal was to deliver a major blow to Israel, and that was done.
All right, guys, are you tired of wasting your money on testosterone booster products that don't work? Well, I don't blame you, which is why our sponsor, Nugenix Total T, actually lets you try it before you buy it. That's right. You can get a complimentary bottle when you text 231-231 and enter keyword Spicer. Nugenix Total T testosterone booster has testofen. That will help you turn back the clock and re-energize your life, but you don't have to take their word for it. Like I said, you can try it before you buy it. Look at this. I've got mine. You need to get yours. If you like it, you just keep using it. If not, you can keep the sample, but you've got nothing to lose. You've got a lot to gain: energy, muscle drive, even more passion. Get that complimentary sample when you call 231-231. You just text it right there. You enter keyword Spicer. It's the #1 doctor recommended brand and the #1 selling testosterone boosting brand at both GNC and Walmart. But you can get that complimentary sample by texting right now 231-231. And entering word Spicer. It can help re-energize your life, get you back to how you used to feel. And if you're not totally satisfied, you get that 100% refund plus the shipping and the processing fees. You can get that complimentary bottle when you text 231-231, enter keyword Spicer. And if you do it right now, you'll get a bottle of Nugenix Thermo X, which is their newest and most powerful fat incinerator ever, with key ingredients to help you lose stubborn fat fast and get lean fast. It's absolutely free. It's a bonus when you text 231-231 and enter keyword Spicer. Go ahead and do that right now. Texting enrolls you into recurring automated text messages. Consent not required to purchase. Message and data rates may apply. #1 doctor recommended brand by primary care physicians based on an independent survey conducted by IQVIA 2022. All right, I want to introduce our guest, Lisa Daftari. She is the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk and the host of the Foreign Desk with Lisa Daftari. She understands the region better than anybody I know. She's going to help break down the Biden trip, his policy, his interaction with foreign leaders, and where we go from here. Lisa, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you making time. Let me just start with this. What do you make of what the president is trying to accomplish on this trip to Israel, and is he achieving those goals?
You know, before he went, we were thinking about the goals of the trip, what it could potentially accomplish and what it should accomplish, right? Two concerns and perhaps requirements of this trip. One, obviously, is to bring the hostages home, especially because there are American hostages in the mix. This is an ally of ours. This is basically, as many people have called it, Iran's war on the free world, and Israel doing the dirty work in eradicating Hamas. Secondly, we'll piggyback off of the first thought, is that will the Biden administration push for a premature ceasefire, not allowing the Israelis to do what they set out to do? The goal of this war, and again, when people try to make both sides look very equal, the goal of Hamas was to come in and cause a massacre of civilians. The goal of Israel in declaring war was to eradicate or decimate Hamas to the best of its ability. So if there should be a premature ceasefire, anything short of that goal will mean more probable that we would get a Hamas attack anywhere else in the world, including Europe and the United States. So it would behoove the Biden administration to allow Israel to do what it deems necessary in terms of diminishing Hamas at this moment.
So the thing that I find interesting is sometimes we have tried to apply logic to illogical things, right? I looked at what happened in Israel and said, would this have happened if they didn't feel a sense of U.S. weakness? Is that a fair assessment, or is Hamas so barbaric and savage that they don't worry about retaliation, or they don't care about the United States? So was this inevitable, or was it they sensed weakness and took advantage of it?
Sean, I think you hit the most important point in all of this. I'm going to take one step back. It's not just Hamas. Obviously, we know Iran's regime is pulling the puppet strings. Iran's regime has played the Biden administration like a fiddle from day one they came into office. They said the Biden administration wanted to reverse Donald Trump's policies on Iran. And I'm going to take one step back from that and say President Obama was the first to flip our foreign policy, meaning I'm going to just do a foreign policy 101 here.
Okay.
If you look at the presidential timeline of all presidents and you take President Obama and President Biden out of that timeline, you will never know whether that president was Democrat or Republican when it comes to two things and that are relate to this equation, and that is Israel and terrorism. We never wavered in our relationship with Israel. We never wavered on having a strong stance on terrorism, national security, protecting our borders, protecting our assets, protecting our allies. But comes along President Obama from day one, apologizing to our enemies, from day one, wanting to make nice with Iran's regime at the expense of turning our backs to Saudi Arabia, Israel, and any other moderate forces in the region. He literally took our policies with the region and flipped it on its head. Comes along Donald Trump, and from day one, he says, I'm going to rip up that Iran nuclear deal because it's a useless piece of paper.
No,
right?
I was there. It was fascinating to watch him. I mean, I remember when we pulled out of this and everybody freaked out and Trump was like, it's the wrong, we're not sticking in this thing. But so I guess let's get back to the question I asked.
Yes.
Was this attack inevitable? Or what if Trump had won re-election or Biden hadn't shown appeasement to Iran, would this have happened, or does Hamas
I don't believe that. I don't, just to give you a yes or no, I do not believe that would have happened. I think when you're whining and dining an enemy and telling them that regardless of what you do, kill protesters on the streets, beat a woman for not wearing her hijab properly to death, we'll look the other way. We're not even going to talk about regime change when there are hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of Iran calling for regime change for a whole year. The Biden administration looked the other way. Why? Because they wanted to strike a deal. They never would have punished the Houthis in Yemen or Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas in Gaza because they wanted to appease the regime. So the regime thinks to itself, we have up until Biden is in office to do something, and this is the perfect time to do it.
It was interesting. So I think it is fascinating because the U.S. media, and we'll talk about this in a second, seems to, and I've been critical of this last few days, pile on and talk about how great Biden has been to the response.
Right.
But you might be great on the response, but to some degree, if you caused it, right, then you're giving someone credit for creating a problem than trying to solve the problem they created.
Exactly. Bravo. It's interesting. Israelis as well, very happy with Biden's response, and perhaps because they're desperate, because they don't know where they can get support from. And having a podium president right now, and everything he has said at the podium has been wonderful.
Right. But that Lisa, the thing that was so funny, I apologize, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I laughed because when I was working for Trump, they said, great, he gave a good speech, but Trump will revert back to his ways and his policies are, and I agree with you. David Friedman, the former ambassador, was on the show. We've had Dave Rubin, all these people who said, yes, he gave a good speech. And I think you put it best. He gave he's a good podium president, but the actions matter.
Right. And now going forward, my main question, and I've said this in all my interviews, is what will the Biden administration's Iran policy be going forward?
Right.
Not Israel, not Hamas. I want to know the Biden administration's Iran policy going forward.
So what did it mean to you? I want to break this down separately because I want to. So let's just hold on the hospital, on what led up to this hospital being attacked. When the hospital was attacked, one of the fallout, aside from the life being lost, and we'll get to that, was that his trip he was supposed to have met with the King of Jordan, the head of Egypt, the head of the Palestinian Liberation, the PLA. That all got canceled. The boss said no. How big of a deal is it that he's not meeting with those folks? We have to back up a little bit. We also saw Antony Blinken going through the region and getting a cold reaction from everyone. So we kind of saw this coming, right? The Biden administration is very funny because all of a sudden, obviously, their appeasement of Iran has led to this moment. The moderate Arab states know that. Saudi Arabia knows that. Jordan knows it. Egypt knows it. Morocco knows. I mean, you can go throughout the region and they all know it. But now they want to go through this tour of the Middle East and say, let's kumbaya here. Let's
try to de-escalate the situation together. And they're all like, get out of here. We're not even going to, cater to your shenanigans. You try to solve this one on your own because you created the problem. None of this is being reported in the media. You're asking the best questions, Sean. And the bottom line is, I looked at some friends and family last night who were asking me about the Biden trip, and I was like, I think he's going to go have a falafel and like high five Bibi Netanyahu. But really, what can he do other than to ask Bibi kindly, politely to de-escalate? There's nothing that can be done here diplomatically because the states that are required, the neighboring countries that are required to play along, and it will require, of course, the Palestinian Authority, even though Mahmoud Abbas is a figurehead, whatever he says. It's not like Hamas is going to put down their arms if he asks them to. But regardless, in terms of the White House's diplomacy, I think the fact that these countries pulled out, and I do think it was by design. I think all the dominoes fell at the right time. I think that definitely puts, a hindrance on the Biden administration's plan for going out there.
All right, with all the uncertainty in the market, I'm sure that you're looking to secure your financial future. That's why I suggest you head over to Bishop Gold Group. They are America's premier precious metals company. You guys all know this. There's an ever-changing economic landscape. Interest rates are going through the roof. The inflation is still hitting us in so many areas, and precious metals offered by Bishop Gold Group will give you the confidence you need when it comes to investing. You've got all of their strategies they can give you, whether you're looking just to start off, you've got an IRA to roll over, if you're a longtime investor. Bishop Gold Group is the company to trust. I've seen them talk to me about all the options from gold to silver to platinum, palladium. They cater to every individual. The team at Bishop Gold Group understands your financial goals, and they understand the precious metals industry better than anyone else. I've gotten to know these folks. I trust them. So when you talk to them, you know that transparency, integrity aren't just words. They're a way of doing business. They understand what you're trying to achieve, and they can help you do that. So go check them out today. Call 844-984-1616 or visit bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean for a special promotion to start your journey toward prosperity with precious metals. bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean. So let's get back to the hospital. The president lands, and I want to just show you a clip, and let's break it down. So this is the president speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu after he arrives.
Taking too much time, but the point is this, that I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
All right, so the first thing I want to cover with you is this. The president is looking at note cards. Now, I get if you're going to rattle off a bunch of statistics. Here's the aid that we're going to present to you. Here's he has stats and statistics and figures and facts and he wants to hit. He's talking about his feelings. He's talking about the reaction to this hospital. And maybe I'm just being critical, and that's a fair. I mean, I admit it. I'm not a fan of this administration's policies, so I'm willing to accept that maybe I'm just being overly critical. But I looked at it and I said, if you have to sit there and stare at notes, sitting next to the Prime Minister of Israel to express your heartfelt feeling, that didn't look good to me.
No. Well, there's a couple of factors here. I think you're absolutely right to think that this administration, let me start with this. He's old, he's seen out. Perhaps his administration doesn't trust him to go there and say the right things. And perhaps that's why he needs some note cards, even to say, hello, my name is Joe Biden. And I'm not saying that facetiously, because we have seen some of these mistakes that he has made. And it's embarrassing for the United States, for himself, for his administration. Secondly, this administration, if we want to take a look at it as an extension of the Obama administration, has not been so friendly. Look, he never had a formal sit down with Bibi Netanyahu.
Right. Yes.
Right? So
wait, hold on.
The optics matter. The fact that you're sitting there and you can't just be. Listen, Sean, if it were you or me in that seat, we're not in the office of the president, but you would know exactly what to say to Bibi Netanyahu right now.
Right. And just to put a pin in this, they've known each other a long time. Right. And it wasn't just that they hadn't had a meeting. Biden shunned him. He
Right.
refused to meet with him. And when he finally did, it was in New York because he didn't want to give him the honor and the prestige of meeting at the White House. I mean, and suddenly now he's the best friend. I mean, up until a few months ago, it was he's really kind of sticking it to Netanyahu.
Right. And I want to just make one point, Sean, because I see this a lot, and I'm saying this to Israelis, I'm saying this to Americans, I'm saying this to the Biden administration. To marginalize Bibi Netanyahu right now is not the right time.
Right.
Bibi Netanyahu's marginalization in Israel is a domestic issue, and it has nothing to do with this attack. Yes, there was an intelligence failure, and we will find out more about that. But the question I have for all the people who are forgetting Hamas and really sticking it to Bibi Netanyahu is, if Bibi Netanyahu was removed from office, let's put an end to his political career today, would there not be another terror attack on Israel? Would there not have been this terror attack on Israel? I don't think that's a fair, criticism of him at this moment until we get proper intel as to why this happened. None of the reasons or justifications for why Israel missed this or the United States missed this have sat well with me, covering this region for a very long time. I don't buy it for a moment that it was the weekend. They were looking the other way. They had their hair down. Israel doesn't do that. I think there's much more to this. And obviously the sophistication and complexity of this plot being plans by Iran's regime and having their fingerprints all over it adds to that, of course. But I don't think it's the right time to focus on Bibi and let the kind of the blame off of Hamas for even a split second.
So I want to get back to the press conference or the press avail. They're talking, Biden's reading the note cards. They're rehashing this hospital attack that's killed hundreds now. Both sides are pointing fingers at each other. The Israelis are willing to put up intelligence and say, here's why it's clearly Hamas. They said it was a failed rocket, right?
Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It's another terror group. But yes, They did say we will investigate, at least to your point.
But
yes.
there's a will, hey, this is a failed rocket that went off.
Exactly.
And the thought, again, admittedly, I'll admit my bias. Maybe I'm just being picky. But Biden's phraseology on this, he said, we think it's the other team. And I thought to myself, how callous. 500 people have just been killed, at least. And you're calling this the other team as if this is, the Red Sox and the Yankees taking each other on.
Right. He followed that up with, there are people around the world who think otherwise.
Isn't that because he's getting pressure from Jordan, 100%. From Egypt, saying, hey, don't make it. You gotta take the rhetoric down?
I actually would take that a step further. I don't even think he's afraid of Egypt or Jordan. I think he's afraid of America's left. I think he's afraid of his own constituents. I think he's afraid of what the backlash would be here at home if he took sides at this point, even though there is evidence being presented. Look, we needed a resolute president with a spine to handle this. And we knew that Biden going into this was not going to be that character, was not going, especially when it comes to Bibi and especially when it comes to Israel. Very, very unfortunately. Look, in this day and age, there's evidence for everything, right? There's video footage, there's, and unfortunately, social media has played such an ugly role in all of this, obviously, because people very quickly judge and decide. And already we have protests all around the world because of this hospital bombing, and no one will listen to the evidence, even though, as you said, Israel said, let's take a step back here. Let's investigate this and we'll get back to you. And they got back to the world. They show Biden the evidence and he goes, it looks like it was, and it's not even the other team. This is, self-sabotage and then trying to pin it on Israel. This is exactly the narrative that plays over and over again. I've seen this so many times. And let me tell you one other thing. So many of the elements of this war, taking hostages, killing your own in terms of setting up the other side, all Iran's regime. I mean, look, remember the hostages they took in 1979, 1980. Look at what they did with Cinema Rex, which was in the time of setting up the Shah to make it look like the Shah's government set up this movie theater on fire, killing Iranians, when it was actually the Basij that did that. This has so many elements of Iran's regime in it. And to really look at that and say it was the other side, I don't know if he's trying not to understand the context. He's trying to minimize the damage onto himself in choosing a side and siding with Israel in this case.
So the U.S. response so far has been to send two aircraft carrier groups to the region. You got the Ford and the Ike. Then you've got 2,000 troops going over, largely in administrative roles. Is that they're saying this is a deterrence? Does Hamas or Iran care? Right? This is something that I sort of, let me back into this for a second. When the president visited Ukraine, they gave a heads up to Russia and said, hey, the president's going to be going over there. And even Putin knows we're not going to do this, right? Another state actor wouldn't do this. I don't think that Iran or Hamas cares. Like, they might be like, great, this is our opportunity to strike. Is that a fair concern? Or because I just don't think they don't look at it like a state actor, like another country, and say, okay, this would take us into World War III. Yeah. They might look at it as, hey, this is an opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think they would have initiated such a war had they actually believed that the United States would have the teeth to get involved. This is all in their calculation. And again, this wasn't something they thought of overnight. This is a complex plot that had strategy, tactics, and a lot of calculation, which did believe that right now the Biden administration, A, cannot afford to get into another war. B, they have elections coming up and they don't want to, the Democrats don't want to get involved in another war, let alone one that would be so deadly and costly. And obviously the Middle East is a trigger point for many because they know it's a war that never ends and costs a lot of lives. So I think that obviously that calculation went in there. And also remember, Iran's regime has done something very masterful over the last decade. And this started again with President Obama. I'm not picking on him. These are the facts. When we saw insurgencies pop up in Iraq, in Syria, we have the Houthis in Yemen, you have Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah, by the way, if that becomes a significant second front to this war, they are richer and more endowed than Hamas is, by the way. And again, the number one proxy of Iran's regime. So they have surrounded Israel in a way that the war will be contained in that region, and it will not be inside Iran or against Iran or Iranian civilians, which is a good thing in many ways. But the fact that they have surrounded Israel very strategically, the United States is too complex and too messy for the United States to get involved. So they park next to, the Eastern Mediterranean. They're like, we're going to hang out here because symbolically they want to say that they did something, and symbolically they want to say that they came to the aid of our ally. But too little, too late. This is all go to the root of the problem. This is all because we emboldened Iran's regime. They have been setting this up for a very, very long time, and they knew it was the right time to pull the trigger.
So bottom line, does Iran or Hamas look at the actions of the U.S. militarily as a deterrent or not?
Not in the sense of taking this forward. Look, the damage has already been done to Israel, right? 1,500 civilians tortured brutally. I mean, they make ISIS look like, nothing in comparison. When you look at the horrific details of this attack on Israel, that nothing's going back. That's not going to be reversed, meaning this is an absolute stain on their intelligence. It's a moral hit. It's an emotional hit. If you've been to Israel, I've been there 20 times in terms of coverage. I've been to their border towns. I've been, into Gaza, into the West Bank. You understand the value for life inside Israel is even one casualty is too many. Then you juxtapose that with this hospital being hit by their own rockets. And then when the media wakes up to kind of having to correct the narrative that it was actually them, the Palestinians gloss over it as if hundreds of lives lost for nothing, for a propaganda stunt, is just, something to just gloss over and to forget. So I think in terms of Hamas and the Iran regime looking at the United States, I mean, they're only moving forward right now because the damage has been done. Now they're in victim mode. Oh, look at that death toll rising. Oh, the Israelis are after genocide. They want to wipe out Gaza. They want to do this. They want to do that. The Israelis are after civilians. None of this being true. But of course, they have partners in the mainstream media, in America's left, in the woke movement, on college campuses, college professors calling this exhilarating and awesome. And that is why we have the narrative that we have today. Otherwise, I tweeted this last night. Had there been a Hamas attack on a place like France, Okay, same attack on civilians, going into a concert, taking 300 kids out right there. Same attack. The French people and their supporters would not have had to spend the last 11 days on social media trying to defend themselves, on the streets of LA, New York, and Miami trying to defend themselves. It would never have happened. This is anti-Semitism. This is the rhetoric of the Biden administration. And of course, to your main point, it is a weakening of the United States' resolve on the global stage in terms of our foreign policy. The United States is no longer number one. It is not being taken seriously. And now we're going to see how we're going to have to de-escalate from here.
All right, guys, most of us know what it's like to be without power, sometimes for an hour, maybe a day, a couple days after a natural disaster, a hurricane, a windstorm, whatever. But now national security experts are warning that our power grid is more vulnerable than ever. And they've identified 9 key substations, which if attacked, they're saying we could lose power for months. That's why having your own solar power is more important than ever. So I recommend the Patriot Power Generator, which is a solar generator that you don't have to install in your house. It's portable. You can take it with you. You can use it inside your house. And it's powerful enough that if power goes out, we're talking your phones, your tablets, your computers, medical devices, even your refrigerator gets power. So if you go to 4patriots.com and use code SPICER, you get 10% off your first purchase. It's 4patriots.com, includes that Patriot Power Generator. You'll get that guarantee for a year, free shipping if it's over $97, and a portion of every sale is donated to charities that support veterans, right? That's great. So go to 4patriots.com, use code SPICER, 4patriots.com. You do not want to be without power in case something happens.
Where do we go from here?
The first step is for all these refugees. We've seen the King of Jordan say, absolutely not. You obviously got a lot of people in the United States, Ron DeSantis saying, I don't want to take any in. What happens to these people who are trapped in Gaza and trying to get out and saying, I live there, but this is not me?
Right. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, I think that's one of the main reasons perhaps the Biden administration wanted to meet with these neighboring Arab nations and saying, you got to help out here. Look, Palestinians and Jordanians are blood. They're the one and the same, right? They were called Jordanians before 1948. They're called Palestinians now. It's interesting to watch the world condemn Israel over and over and over again for the responsibility of a people whose own people don't want to help them. And I don't think many people know this. They just look at Israel and they repeat the slogans and they repeat the taglines of Israel as a genocidal state. Israel is occupying. Israel is an apartheid state, and not really understanding the history or the context of all of this. To your point, I don't know where these refugees will go. I don't know if they can go back home. But we will have to see more help coming from Mahmoud Abbas, more help coming from the West Bank, more help coming from the Jordanians and the Egyptians. They just have to help out here. I don't think
but that's I get. But that's the thing that's interesting is, and I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying, like, we look at it like this is the obvious solution, or this
right.
is but then the king wasn't equivocal. He was like, it's not happening.
It's not happening. Right.
I mean, and so you say, well, then where do they go? Because at the end of the day, if Israel wants to have this ground offensive, these folks who want nothing to do with this need to be able to go somewhere to escape the violence. Right. And if no one's allowing them in, I mean, I think that's what Hamas wants. They want to trap them in there, use them as human shields.
But let's take this one step further. I think what Hamas is really hoping for, and Biden's going to help out with that, I assume, will be that to cancel the ground offensive. And that's what I'm hearing from my intel sources.
Interesting.
I think that is,
but Netanyahu, the Israeli people, I assume, would rise up and say, hey, you got us all fired. Like, there's no way we can't.
I'll tell you why. The Israeli people are stuck in a very bad position. Bibi, Intel, they're stuck in a very bad position because even though the Biden administration has not been very kind to them and personally with Bibi, they are still under pressure from the United States because they know the United States is all they have. So if the United States should say, you're not doing the ground offensive, they're not going to do the ground offensive. I mean, they can try to talk about it and negotiate and try to convince the United States. But I think at the end of the day, if they are under pressure by, and this is my personal opinion, I think if they are under pressure by Israel and if they believe that their relationship would be kind of at risk or in jeopardy, I think that they would reconsider a ground invasion. And I think that because it will create other consequences, both for the Biden administration, the international community, the region, obviously, as you said, Jordan and Egypt and Mahmoud Abbas not complying or not playing along. As I said, I do believe that their cancellation of the meeting and using the hospital bombing as the pretext to cancel that meeting was all by design. I don't think they want to get involved. They don't want to have any responsibility. They don't want to help out. They don't want any collaborations with the United States or with Israel. And they personally want to leave this as a responsibility for the United States and Israel to de-escalate. And that will be not doing a ground invasion.
But so let's just play this out. It de-escalates. The U.S. urges Israel not to go on a ground offensive into Gaza. Israel agrees, whatever Netanyahu comes up with something. How does Hamas then react? I mean, are they emboldened and say, now we can do this again? Or is this, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, what did Hamas want the first time? What was was their goal to wipe out Israel? And if so, don't they keep going on the offensive?
I think the goal wasn't to wipe out Israel. I think that is way too audacious for even for them. I think the goal was to deliver a major blow to Israel, and that was done.
So that's it.
Consider it victory for them.
So if Israel said, we're not going to go on the ground offensive, they go, okay, let's call it a day?
Listen, regardless, Israel lost this war, right? Think about it. 1,500 beautiful faces of these innocent civilians. And they don't want to kill Palestinians. I do not believe that the Israeli soldiers who are trained the way that they are trained want to kill civilians that are in harm's way. That is why they do their best to evacuate. That's why they do their best to get the international community and the UN to assist with evacuations, because they don't want that death toll to rise. The rising of that death toll only helps the Palestinians and their narrative. And they are very happy. Unfortunately, there is no respect for life when they are happy to have that death toll rise, because it plays into their narrative. So at this point, Hamas won, right? Because the Israelis, again, don't want that death toll to rise. They don't want the Israel side death toll to rise. And if they go into Gaza on a ground invasion, there will be a higher death toll on both sides. They will lose military men and women, and they will have to deal with the global consequences of having a higher death toll. So I do believe that, in terms of morale, I think the Israelis lost this, and they know that. And they will have to go back when this is all over and sit down and think about why there was an intel lapse, why their relationship with the United States is where it's at, where it is, where they were vulnerable. And when I say they were vulnerable, when Israel gets strike, it's a strike against the United States.
Right.
They are our appendage in the Middle East. And it doesn't seem that way with the Biden administration. It didn't seem that way with the Obama administration. But under Trump, and you know this better than I do, we felt it. We felt that any policy that we helped with in terms of moving the embassy, in terms of doubling down on the Golan Heights, in terms of giving Bibi the support that he needs, all of that empowered the United States and empowered Israel. We worked together, and that's the synergy that has always been, because they are our ally and our extension in the Middle East.
So Biden's asking for $100 billion that would encapsulate aid to both Ukraine and now to Israel. I feel like that, the idea that somehow you just randomly a few days later come up with a perfect number of $100 billion, it immediately sends my brain to go, that's just made up. There is no, we always ask kids when they're in like third or fourth grade, show us your math, that you didn't just guess the number. Do you think that that's a sufficient number, that's a real number?
There's a few things here. Obviously, this opportunity probably turns the Biden administration on, because they could send more money to Ukraine.
Right. That's
number one. Number two, one of the things that I have talked about, because there is this false people are debunking the fact that the $6 billion that the Biden administration just gave a nod on with the prisoner swap with Iran's regime didn't go into funding this war. Okay, that is the left talking point. They love to say it. And we've all gone around and said, okay, but even just the talk and the confidence of getting $6 billion poured into your savings account will give you the confidence to write a very generous check and move on. I've added this point as well. When President Biden came into office, he reversed a lot of Trump policies. One of them, from the very start was to reinstate aid to the Palestinians. Now, the reason why Trump, and I don't need to school you on this, Sean, one of the reasons Trump stopped aid to the Palestinians is because they were doing the paid to slave program, which is giving money, monthly checks and stipends to those whose families are martyrs and kill themselves in the name of Allah and create jihad. They were getting U.S. taxpayer money to do this.
Right.
And Trump said, no, heck no, not on my time. Biden came in, reinstated this aid without any preconditions. Imagine, Sean, getting checks from the United States, aid to the Palestinians, and not really writing in the memo, do not kill people with this money. Okay? Now, when people say this is not the $6 billion, well, it just might be money from the Biden administration directly, which is even worse, meaning we know that it wasn't just Hamas. The Wall Street Journal broke this. We've been saying it all along, but the Wall Street Journal showed us the receipts. They showed us the timeline of Iran meeting with 4 different splinter terror organizations, one of them being Hamas in Beirut over the last few months. August and September were where they got the green light. Iran signed off on it, and then they conducted this terror attack on October 7th. Now, again, the money, the empowerment, all of it goes back to the Biden administration. No one is talking about this.
No.
Now,
In fact,
now the world, the narrative has shifted again to the Palestinian people, the poor Palestinian people. Well, why aren't we going to the source of why they are the poor Palestinian people? Why do they have to live under Hamas, which is paid for by Iran's regime, we are empowering? There's so many dots to connect here, and it all goes back to Tehran. And the Biden administration is cleaning its hands of it. They're going to write another hefty check to Ukraine. I mean, we need another 4 hours for that. That's another episode. And then writing a check to the Palestinians. For what? Why aren't there any preconditions? Why aren't we trying to improve their lives? And I will say this because I don't want to sound like I'm a monster. The Palestinians are victims. They have this beautiful 7-mile stretch on the Mediterranean that could make this Saint-Tropez look like a dump. And instead of developing it and instead of using whatever they were given in terms of money and resources, they're using it as a launch pad for war. That's all they do. And no one is calling them out on it. We want better for the Palestinians. It would mean better for everyone. But you have to go. UNRWA, the UN, gives so much money to the Palestinian people. Why don't you go into those schools and pull those textbooks that teach them to kill Jews? Don't you want better for them? Or do we just want to throw money at them?
Right. Well, unfortunately, that seems to be the case on so many problems. We just keep throwing money at it and not looking at the root. I mean, maybe we said, someone was supposed to be doing the root cause of so many issues, and I don't think she's really solved any problems. Thank you for your time. Lisa, I really appreciate your insight, your knowledge. You've been doing this for so long. You know this issue back and forth and all the players. So thanks for sharing that insight with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And thank you for underscoring the real major issues here.
You bet. All right. I want to thank Lisa for that enjoyable and insightful conversation. You don't hear a lot of the stuff that we talked about in the media. And that was kind of, she brought that up as well. These guys are so all in on Biden that they're not giving you the straight news as to what's really causing some of this and where we go from here. They just want to talk about how great Biden's doing in his response, not the fact that to some degree he created this problem and he's not doing anything to really stop it. And I think her point about where Israel goes from here, because of potential U.S. support for a ceasefire or a drawback, is important. But also, what's this $100 billion? I'm going to keep pushing on this, but the idea that somehow it just happens to round out to $100 billion, do you buy that? Because I don't. Well, you know what? Ukraine and Israel need $100 billion. Tell me where that number came from. But this is the problem with Washington. We just make up numbers and everyone goes, okay, that's enough. Does that sound good enough? I mean, there's no math behind that. Anyway, in other big news, the House had its second vote today on trying to choose a new speaker. Jim Jordan from Ohio had lost 20 votes on the first one. Today, he lost 22. He moved in the wrong direction. So let me give you the upside and the downside. The upside is 2 people came in his direction, but he lost 4, right? So he lost more than he gained. And he went in the wrong direction. When McCarthy was doing this, he never went below 200. Jordan wanted to bring this to the floor and force it. And the question now is, does he keep going? Or do they do a couple things? Try to empower Patrick McHenry, the Speaker pro tem. There's a motion that Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania might offer that would empower him to sort of act as the Speaker until a new one is chosen, but allow him to do legislative business. It's a privileged resolution, so it would get taken up right by the House. The Democrats seem very in support of this, and enough for Republicans potentially could. The other question is, does Jordan just keep plugging ahead and trying to scrap away and see what he can do? But you're moving in the wrong direction. And the people who are voting against him have shown no signs that they're willing to give up. One thing I will tell you about is the tactics. And I talked to some folks last night about this. They are going after, there's a lot of conservatives that are posting all the phone numbers of these guys who are voting against him. And the idea was to pressure them, to put pressure on them by having people call them conservative influencers and activists, et cetera, to pressure them into voting. Everyone that I talked to last night, and it's not all of them, is saying that that is making them, their resolve stiffer, that they will now never vote for Jordan. Agree or disagree, I'm just telling you what's happening, that this hardball tactic wasn't probably the way to go with a bunch of these guys and releasing their phone. And again, that's all public. They're all public servants. I'm not, don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm saying is playing hardball and saying, great, we'll jam you with phone calls. One of them, Don Bacon, was talking about how his wife was getting raked over the coals. I just think for some of these guys, the carrot might have been better than the stick. That's just my opinion. And I'm not telling, this is not saying that I don't want Jordan. I think this is just saying, how do you actually get Jim Jordan to become Speaker? I'm just telling you, for a lot of these guys, the stick approach was probably not the smartest move. And I think like I said, it stiffened their resolve. So where we go from here, who knows? But the upside is we have a great show headed your way tomorrow. Larry O'Connor of WMAL, he broadcasts here in the nation's capital. Tony Katz out in Indianapolis. We're going to break down so much of what's going on a fun panel discussion that, again, is insightful and enjoyable. Carol Swain will be here at the end of the week on Friday as well. Obviously, a ton happening here in Washington, D.C. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for supporting the show. Please continue to share it with friends. Again, I think you're getting questions and discussions that you're not getting anywhere else. And the idea isn't to persuade you. You're all smart people. The idea is to help inform you what's really going on. What aren't you being told in the mainstream media? If you want to text me, you can, 571-441-4991. But a lot to break down in the world of politics happening, not just this week, but as we go forward. So I thank you for your support. You're being here. Please continue to subscribe to the show as well. Apple Podcast, YouTube. You never know when we're going to get canceled, but it's always helpful to show growth in the show. Thanks so much. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.